What the city is talking about.
The news that impacts you.
Welcome to the Montreal Now podcast.
With Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Welcome to the week that was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and this week we'll take a look at these stories. While things may be getting back to normal as far as our labor market is concerned, productivity is not. A new study shows Canada lagging behind almost every other country in the G7. We'll try to find out why from the group that did the research.
You know, I thought I was pretty careful about what I post online about my daughter, but after speaking with these two experts, I don't think I'm being careful enough. What you need to know before you post that picture, or this interview might even have you deciding to not post kid stuff ever again.
Travel guides have been an invaluable accessory when visiting places for the first time, but now artificial intelligence, AI, is making those guides worse, not better. We'll talk to a New York Times columnist about what to watch out for and why cheaper is not always better when it comes to travel guides.
But we begin with this. Sadly, Robbie Robertson died this week at the age of 80. He was a larger-than-life character, a legend, and an absolute icon in the Canadian music scene and way beyond. We spoke to a renowned music historian about Robertson's legacy and how, despite being a Canadian man of Indigenous heritage, he's somehow credited for helping to craft the sound of Americana.
I pulled into Nazareth, was feeling about half-past dead. I just need some place where I can lay my head. Hey, mister, can you tell me where a man might find a bed? He just grinned and shook my hand. No was all he said. Take a load off.
One of the many songs co-written by Robbie Robertson when, of course, he was performing with the band. I want to consider one of the all-time, I think that's fair to say, one of the all-time great groups.
Yeah.
And Robbie Robertson, of course, who's worked with or had worked with so many bands, including Bob Dylan, of course, way back in the day. So we found out yesterday he had passed at the age of 80. Had been fighting an illness for quite some time. John EINARSON is one of North America's foremost music historians. John, I saw you yesterday on CTV talking about this. And, you know, Natasha, when we first heard the story, kind of reacted like, oh my God, he was 80 years old. Still. But nobody really, I don't think, had an idea that he was very ill.
No, and I think we also feel like he's someone who is immortal almost. You know, he's just a legendary figure, an icon here in Canada and beyond. John, how have you been remembering Robbie Robertson?
Well, it took me by surprise. As you said, I sort of thought, too, he was always going to be there and he was always going to live on forever. And I wasn't aware that he had been ill. Oh, he kept that very, very quiet. But nonetheless, it's heartbreaking news.
So with respect to people, and I think most Canadians will know who he is, but can you provide a bit of history with respect to what he did and his Indigenous roots as well?
In the last maybe even 30 years, he hasn't been putting out music in as frequently as he did back in the late 60s to early 70s. But his legacy rests on the music that he wrote and recorded with the band, capital B band, and that music is timeless. I mean, take a load off Annie. If you listen to The Weight that you just played a little bit of, that music isn't tied to a particular period of time. It doesn't have the markers of a psychedelic music or anything else. It's beautiful music. I mean, the lyrics, the music, everything about it, the arrangement is so well crafted that it will be music that you'll listen to 50 years from now even. And he managed to create a body of work during that period of time of about 5 or 6 years with the band that will stand up, and his legacy is based on that period of time.
I wonder, I mentioned just quickly before you began about his Indigenous roots, because there's a tie in here as well to where Robbie Robertson came from.
Yeah, his background was Mohawk, and he spent a lot of his summers on a Mohawk reservation, and really learning the culture. But you never knew about his Mohawk roots throughout his time. I mean, when he was with Bob Dylan, and before that with Ronnie Hawkins, and then with the band, it wasn't until really the late 1980s and into the 1990s that he began to look back into his past and look into his heritage and his roots, and began to write music about the Indigenous experience and integrating Indigenous sounds and tones as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about his lyrics too. There's something so poetic about his lyrics. I feel like, I don't know, we don't hear many songs written like that anymore.
He went back to the storytelling style of traditional music and painting word pictures in such an evocative way. I mean, the funny thing is, he was a 16-year-old kid from Toronto who went down to the Mississippi Delta, and he absorbed the whole lifestyle that was down there, and he was able to write about it as if he grew up, in Memphis, or grew up, on a cotton farm in Arkansas somewhere. He just picked up on all of that so well. But he also was fortunate to be writing for Levon Helm, who was the drummer in the band, and the only American. The other four guys were Canadians. And Robbie was able to craft songs that just fit Levon's voice and approach and everything about the music.
And when they say, John, just as a final question, they talk about, here's a Canadian-born performer being given credit for what they call Americana, for that style of music.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he helped found that, really, because in 1968, when the band's debut album, Music from Big Pink, came out, it came out at a time when we were still getting a lot of psychedelic music, and getting hippy-dippy, trippy lyrics and 20-minute guitar solos and that sort of thing. And they bucked that whole trend and took music back to its roots, back to country and bluegrass and folk music and gospel, and brought all those elements back to rock. And in so doing, that album and then Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline, they were both a clarion call to jettison all the overblown stuff of psychedelic music and bring music back, and pop music and rock music, back to its traditional roots. And they did so well.
John, thank you so much. Appreciate your time
pleasure.
this afternoon. Thanks for reminding everybody what a great loss we have in the passing of Robbie Robertson yesterday at the age of 80.
He'll never be forgotten.
I was reading one of the tributes being paid, or I guess reading a biography, and talking about the fact that he did that whole scene as well in New York in the Brill Building, hung out with those people back in the day when he was just getting started. And John just mentioned psychedelic music. There's a mention of Robbie Robertson sitting down with Jimi Hendrix before Jimi Hendrix was Jimi Hendrix. I think his name was Jimmy James at the time when he was just an unknown guitar player. He met some of the most important people in music, period, throughout his career.
He was influenced by them, but also influenced them himself.
Excellent point.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
While things may be getting back to normal as far as our labor market is concerned, productivity is not. A new study shows Canada lagging behind almost every other country in the G7. We'll try to find out why from the group that did the research. Let me move on to this next story, because this is not the kind of thing you might expect to see happening in this country. There's a new report from the Montreal Economic Institute that shows Canada is actually lagging behind the rest of the G7 in terms of productivity. What's causing it? What does it mean for our economy? RENAUD BROSSARD is Senior Director of Communications at the Montreal Economic Institute. He's on the line. RENAUD, thanks for being here this afternoon.
Well, thanks for having me.
Let me first of all ask, I don't know, I'm kind of surprised to hear that. I thought we were actually towards the top of that list. I mean, historically, where are we in terms of productivity?
So historically, we were doing a lot better, but unfortunately, for the last couple of decades, we've been steadily falling. And it's not so much that our productivity hasn't gotten better, it's just that everybody else has gotten a lot more productive than we are. So first off, we need to really explore what we mean by productivity. What we mean is the value created per hour work. So an hour of work on average in Canada creates about $53.30 US in value, which, sounds pretty good. But when we compare it to the G7 average, the G7 average is about $63.90. Or if we compare it to our neighbors to the south, they create about $72.10. So that has a direct impact on us, because the less productive we are, the less of an hour of work creates value, the less that hour gets compensated, and the less we have in our pockets at the end of the day.
Renaud, I want to make sure I understood correctly, though. We're stable, right? It hasn't actually declined here. We're stable. It's just that other countries
Everyone
are
else
doing
is getting better.
So
right.
How does that negatively impact us?
Well, it negatively compared to where we could be.
Okay.
Because the fact is, understandably, thankfully at least, our productivity has not gone down. But the rest of the world is catching up. The rest of the world is doing much better. They're progressively getting more productive. And as the years go by, more and more countries are passing us, becoming more productive. And this means that their citizens are getting a better standard of living, which is great for them, but that we tend to stagnate around where we are instead of progressing as well. So let's say that $10.60 difference in hourly productivity between Canada and the G7 average. It doesn't sound like much, but when you compound that with 35 hours a week, 48 weeks of work a year, because we still need to get a vacation, that translates to $17,800 less in terms of our. Sorry, I'm trying to find the English word here. In terms of our standard of living compared to what it could be. And I don't know about you, and I don't know about the people listening, but if you're telling me I could be living $17,800 better than I am now,
sure,
I'd be all for that.
I'm curious, though, as to why. My first question, and I know you talk about here private investment, are we, I hate to use the word, are we lazier here? Why is the productivity down?
So it's definitely not about laziness. I think Canadians are working quite hard, and this is also why productivity is measured as the amount of value created by our work. So it's not because we're not working enough. It's that when we work, we're just not creating as much, which means in itself is that the equipment that we're working with to create that value, whether it is the factories and the way that they're organized, are simply not as productive as they are elsewhere. And this is a symptom of a chronic lack of investment in our productive capacity. So if you look at the data for private investment in the non-residential sector, because, people building condos doesn't necessarily make us more productive, but people buying better cranes, for instance, to be able to do it better or to do it in a safer way will affect our productivity. So the amount that's invested by the private sector per worker per year in non-residential investments, about $17,000 here, which sounds like a lot, but if you compare to the U.S.'s $27,000, we're lagging quite far behind. And what this means is that as their productivity grows faster, we're lagging more and more compared to our peers in other advanced economies.
I'm just trying to understand something. If we are seeing, and you're saying here, this has to do with private investment or a lack of private investment.
Are they investing elsewhere?
Why not? Or why not invest here? Are they not getting the support from government? Are there no grants? No. I mean, why would be the reason?
Well, it's not so much a matter of grants as it is not attractive enough for people to invest here. The fact is we just couldn't replace all of this lost private investment with grants. With the amount of workers in Canada for about $10,000 per worker, that would mean about $200 billion per year in public investment. And I don't know about you, I don't think the SETH can handle another $200 billion to spend.
No.
So it's rather, what can we do to make it more attractive that when investors look at where to spend their money, where to invest, and they're looking at Canada, they're looking at the U.S., they're looking at France, we need to wonder why they're choosing France and the U.S. more than Canada. And a decent part of it is our regulatory system. The regulatory burden is quite extensive, quite costly. And another part of it is also our tax burden, where ultimately they see that it's much more profitable for them to invest elsewhere because of regulation, because of taxes, than it is to invest here.
All right, that's worrisome in and of itself, right? I mean, when you're not attractive enough to attract private investment and that money goes somewhere else, that's not something you can turn around on a dime and change, right? I'm thinking this is probably a long-term problem.
It is a long-term problem, but we know the solutions, thankfully. And the solutions are to look at our regulatory environment. The longer it takes to get a project approved,
right,
the more expensive it is for the person that's putting that project forward, and the riskier it is for them to lose all their investment. So if we're able to streamline that a little bit, then there's a matter of, how just the amount of forms that need to be filled out, or the amount of regulatory of necessary regulatory steps to be done for everything, where we can streamline that, we can make it more productive. And then again, there's still the issue of taxes, where when other countries lower their tax burden, become more attractive, well, they become more attractive because by comparison, other countries become less attractive. So we need to address all of those issues. So we know the recipe. It's not an easy way out, but we know the recipe to get out of it.
Renaud, I find myself wondering what this means for the average person. Does it mean less prosperity? Does it mean less job prospects or a less advantageous future for people? What does it mean?
Essentially, it means less of a possibility for compensation because, again, if every hour of work creates up to $50 in value, that hour of work cannot be compensated more than $50. It'll be compensated a little bit less. So the higher the productivity, the higher the compensation level, and the more that people can actually afford the various things they need, the various wants that they have, the better their standard of living. This is why a lot of the economic literature directly links productivity and the standard of living as basically being almost the same measure, because the productivity translates into an ability to get a better salary and an ability to pay the things that we actually need to live better.
You know, we're going to have to end this because our time is up. I wonder, though, as you describe the situation, you're basically saying too much red tape, a non-competitive tax situation. This is the same kind of thing people talk about just in Montreal, right? We talk about housing and why it takes so long to get stuff done. And the issue of red tape and all the hurdles you have to clear as a private developer here are standing in the way of being able to do more. So if governments are aware of this, do you have a sense, Renaud, that they are, going to change anything here? I mean, it's starting to hurt us. It's obvious. Why do we still have this?
I think a lot of them are starting to pay a lot more attention. Just the fact that our GDP per capita adjusted for inflation is about the same as it was in 2018 is one of those things that had a lot of alarm bells go off in Ottawa. I think the same goes for Quebec, where Premier Legault has said he wants to catch up with Ontario, sort of get better paying jobs so that we can catch up economically with our neighbors. So there's a lot of governments that at least have a little bit of that reflection. Then it's just a matter of actually putting things into action and seeing it get done.
Interesting report. Thank you so much, Renaud. We appreciate it.
It's always a pleasure.
Informative.
Interactive. And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
You know, I thought I was pretty careful about what I post online about my daughter, but after speaking with these two experts, I don't think I'm being careful enough. What you need to know before you post that picture, or this interview might even have you deciding to not post kid stuff ever again.
It's one of those things where if you're a parent, chances are you've done this before, but you may want to think twice about having or hearing what these next two guests have to say. And this is about posting pictures online. We talk about this from time to time.
I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Now my daughter is old enough, I get her consent before I post stuff, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe I need to be a little bit more wary, but we're going to find out with our guests.
Okay, and you'll find out the reason. I think you can probably figure this out now with social media out there. EMMANUELLE Perron is co-founder of the Center for Online Emotional Intelligence. So I thought we'd start with this as sort of an overview and discuss why this idea of posting pictures of your kids is not a good idea. So EMMANUELLE, thanks for being with us. Let's start with that.
Yes, hi. So first of all, I'm not here really to judge or to say like this is a wrong decision to post online a picture of your kids, but it's certainly something that you want to think about before doing it because yes, there's risk. And because we're with the foundation going into classrooms to discuss with kids, one of the risks is the kid not giving his permission, so not being like really enthusiastic that his picture is taken and shared with family members or friends that they doesn't even know.
I understand your workshops address 10 to 12-year-olds. So is that generally around the age? Like my daughter's 11 and she started to express it, I would say right around 10, where she wanted to have more control over what images were posted. So is that the average age, Manuel?
Yes, it's the average age because you start to comprehend the, like at this developmental state, when you become like more of a teenager, you have more of a feeling of how others perceive you and your image and your identity. So you may want to start to control what others may think of you. But the risks that are associated with posting online are not just associated with the kid's perspective, right? There's also like misuse of these photos. It's rare, but it's still a risk.
Okay, what are we talking about when we talk about misuse? I immediately think about AI and how those photos could potentially be manipulated. What are the risks, Manuel?
Yeah, so there's AI. There's two. the first thing that we think about is like child pornography. Like when you say to your kids, okay, you can play alone in the park, just like near the house. So maybe that you will tell them to not speak with strangers. Well, it's the same thing with internet. Even if you let your kids posting about themselves, you have to say, well, there are people out there with bad
intentions.
behavior. Yeah. So that's one thing. Another thing is just the data of like being. There was a case in Toronto where a mother posted a picture of their son with their leg being harmed. I don't remember. Maybe it was a broken leg. And when this kid wanted like health insurance, the price was higher because the insurance saw that he was injured before that.
Okay. So there are consequences
There's
that we don't know. And I know sharenting is the term that we throw around a lot these days, right? Like we're parenting, but we're oversharing at the same time. So your workshops are more for kids, or is there something for parents as well?
Well, when we are doing workshops in primary schools, we're also offering a webinar for parents. So we're saying basically the same information to the kids, but with more like a solution, how to manage the digital devices in the home and giving example like that.
Okay.
So I want to, first of all, thank you so much, Emmanuel. You can stay there. We want to weigh in with Catherine TABAK, Senior Program Manager of Cybertip.ca, and explain exactly what they're doing and how it's sort of dealing with the situation we're talking about now. So Catherine at Cybertip.ca, how do you sort of involve yourself in this?
So as Canada's tip line for reporting instances of online child sexual abuse and exploitation, we are unfortunately seeing the darker areas of the internet where these images are being misused by the offending community. And so we sort of see the impacts tied to imagery from kids when they're babies up until they turn 18 and thereafter. So we are looking at sort of offender behaviors online and things being reported to our tip line. But we also operate a tool called Project Arachnid that is crawling the public web as well as the dark web. And we are seeing not only the misuse of images, but also offenders that are playing out familial scenarios online using pictures that they are capturing from other people's social media platforms.
Oh, God. And
then also fantasizing in detail about what they would do to that child if they had access to them. So we, like I said, we are seeing sort of the darker spaces of where that's happening and the concerns there. And I echo Emmanuel's concerns tied to really considering the long-term impacts of that with children. As a parent, of course, you want to make sure that you're putting their safety at the biggest priority when it comes to the online space.
So what would be the first piece of advice to a parent considering even doing something like that?
The number one thing for us is really don't post pictures of your kids online. I know it's totally normal as a parent to want to share with your friends, but how well do you really know these people? Sometimes we see these accounts who have thousands and thousands of followers, and it's just not reasonable to think that you have direct personal relationships with all of these people.
Yeah.
But I think the number one thing for us, especially in terms of what we see, is do not post nude or semi-nude pictures of your children, whether that be in the bathtub, potty training, running around the house. I know it looks completely innocent from the parent's perspective, but from what we're seeing in terms of how these pictures are misused, it's really scary.
I'm scared already.
Yeah,
me too.
I can't believe this actually goes on, but it does.
And I'm just thinking, as the children get older, and like we talked about, posting, yes, but asking for their permission and making sure that they're okay with the images. I mean, really, that there's no guarantee of safety. That can make the child more comfortable, but in terms of what the repercussions could be, the risks are still incredibly high, it sounds like.
Well, and I think even, looking at, kids are going back to school, and we see a lot of parents posting pictures of their kids on their first day of school with little bulletins that, give out the school name, the grade, the teacher's name, and it's so easy to find the location of that child. So it really does present a real life safety risk in some circumstances.
Okay.
Look, I'm looking at you, so your daughter, and there's things we do as parents when your kids are really, really, as you just said, innocent things that you could think nothing of. But then again, You know, when my kids were little, we didn't have to worry about the internet. You had a print or something, you'd show it to a relative, and that would be the end of it. Now you're basically exposing that child to the world.
Well, and I think I'm being safe and protective and doing the right thing, but I guess the moment you're posting anything already there, it's already taking a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly it.
At that point, so a parent, hopefully someone's listening now and realizing this is not as, clear-cut as you might think it is, and certainly not as innocent. You're describing, cases where you follow them every day. Typically, how would you get a tip on something like this? Like, how would someone reach out?
Honestly, a lot of what we are having reported into us are forums that are dedicated to pedophiles who are sharing this type of material. We're also seeing specific sites that are being created where people are posting innocuous pictures of kids online and sexualizing them. But we do often see in the context of, parents who maybe have primary custody of their child and the partner is posting pictures on TikTok or what have you. So we do see sort of a spectrum of how pictures can be misused in some cases. But there was also a case in Canada where someone was playing off one child as being their own, and we have parents that are reaching out to us saying, like, we need these Facebook accounts taken down. These are pictures of our kids. But because they're not illegal pictures, it's a lot more difficult to really, of course, our organization would always advocate for the removal of those accounts, but it's really difficult as a parent to try to do that yourself.
We're out of time, but just before we let you go, are all the platforms equally unsafe, or are some kind of worse and scarier than others?
I think if people are going to post pictures of their kids, it's really considering those privacy settings and who you're friends with. But I think every platform comes with its own risks, and there's ways around getting access to information. So I think it's really about what you're comfortable with, and again, thinking about the long-term impacts of what that might look like.
Oh, boy.
Well, look, it's not something pleasant to talk about, but it's best to be aware than to find out after the fact. Thank you so much. Appreciate the time this afternoon.
Thanks.
Okay. It's Cybertip.ca, by the way, if you want to see the kind of work that they do. It's mind-boggling to consider this goes on, but in fact it does.
And prior to that, if you're looking for more local information, Emmanuelle Parent was from Le C.I.E.L, so that's like C.I.E.L. So you can also Google that.
Informative.
Interactive.
And always interesting.
This is Montreal Now with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Travel guides have been an invaluable accessory when visiting places for the first time. But now, artificial intelligence, AI, is making those guides worse, not better. We'll talk to a New York Times columnist about what to watch out for and why cheaper is not always better when it comes to travel guides. Our next story is one of those stories where you kind of wonder, AI sounds great, can do so many different things, and then you read something like this and think, wait a sec. You have reason to be wary and suspicious, certainly when it comes to something. I never would have thought that this would be something you'd have to worry about, right? You want to go somewhere, you want to buy a travel guide, you go online, you check it out, you read a review, boom, you buy it. But there are some people and some companies that have been doing this for a long, long time. Rick Steves, who's a travel writer, reviewer for many, many years, turns out someone stole half his name and is selling the book as Mike Steves. And if you're not paying really good attention, you're thinking, well, I've heard that name before. And this one by Mike Steves is less cheaper, expensive than the one by Rick Steves, so I'll buy it. Well, it turns out it's AI generated, which in and of itself is perhaps not a bad thing. But then you find out that necessarily the stuff in it is not even accurate. So what do you do in a case like this? Seth KUGEL is a travel columnist with the New York Times, an author of Rediscovering Travel, a guide for the globally curious. And Seth is on the line. Thanks for being here this afternoon.
Hey, no problem. Happy to be here.
Did I describe this right in terms of, I saw the image that went with the piece for all these travel guides that unless you actually paid attention, you think were legit?
Sure. I just add one more very important piece, which is one of the reasons these guides sell as well as they do is because presumably whoever is writing them, quote unquote writing them, is also paying for fake reviews on Amazon that allow, these books to have, 4.8 stars average. Because there's also a number of reviews from people who have already bought them, which literally say, this book is written by AI, don't buy it. But they can get buried, especially when people just look at the average number of stars. So that's a real key piece to it.
How is this even legal? How is it being tolerated? How is this happening?
Well, I don't know that it's illegal to write a book using artificial intelligence and sell it, at least in the United States. It's pretty. Those freedom of speech laws can be pretty liberal. So, yes, I don't think it's illegal. Now, is there something illegal about printing something that is not true? I mean, maybe the fact that Mike Steves is impersonating someone else, but you have a million books out there written by people using pen names. So True. I'm not sure it's illegal. It's just a little bit immoral.
So how would you even know? I said, a lot of times you make a really good point. I'm glad you brought that part up about the fake reviews, which you can buy, which is amazing to begin with.
That should not be allowed.
I know. But the thing is, you read those, you make a decision based on them. I mean, how much time would you have to spend looking into a book? Because sometimes they'll offer a few pages up for you to read until you realize that it's basically a ripoff.
Oh, you don't have to spend very long looking at the pages of the book they let you read. It's quite obvious. I mean, especially if you're a seasoned traveler and have read the Rick Steves books or one of the other big brands, you know right away, if you look at those pages, that this is not a real travel guide. So that's pretty easy. Now, I should say that the fake reviews, again, I'm only speaking about the United States, but the fake reviews are definitely not allowed by Amazon. They do a lot of work to take those reviews off. And in fact, over the course of time that we were looking at these books, hundreds of reviews were removed, but of course, other ones, it's a whack-a-mole kind of a game. Like some reviews disappear, new ones appear. So it's not like Amazon is sitting around doing nothing about getting rid of fake reviews. God, who knows what algorithms they have out there looking for them? I know they spend a lot of money doing that. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission of the United States, however, is going to pronounce sometime soon, going to create new rules about fake reviews, and it's almost surely going to be illegal in the United States. I don't know what you guys have up there in terms of laws on fake reviews.
I don't know either, actually.
I'd heard nothing about anything like this. And just to get back to what you said, you could tell fairly quickly as a seasoned traveler. What if you're not a seasoned traveler, right? You want to book a vacation. I don't know. You want to go to Spain. You look at the cover. It looks like it's the same book. How would you know?
Yeah. So, you could compare the first page of this book with any other book, but there's another way that really works well, which is to read the one-star reviews. So on Amazon, if you look at the reviews, you can click on 1 star and you read all the terrible reviews. This is actually a good thing to do with any product.
You're right.
But especially with these, because you'll see something like, oh, this book is a joke. Where did all these 5-star reviews come from? It's obviously written by AI. There'll be things like that. So that'd be my number one piece of advice. Go to the 1-star reviews.
I think that's excellent advice. And like you said, it can extend beyond that. I'm thinking, we're talking about looking for the first couple of pages, but as you point out in the article in the New York Times, sometimes the titles have errors in them. They're not grammatically correct. They're missing words. So I guess that'd be a pretty good tip that it wasn't written by a human.
Yeah. That's not that common. We did find a few like that, and then inside the books we found a few mistakes, like factual mistakes. But to be honest, they're made on purpose to look like regular travel books. The one thing you will see on the inside is, if you look at enough of them, you'll recognize the font, and that is usually used by Kindle Direct Publishing, which is Amazon's self-publishing arm. And that's not to say that a self-published book is bad. In fact, my mother wrote one, and it's great. But it is, you at least figuring out that it's self-published. If you begin to sort of recognize that format, it looks kind of like a term paper rather than a book you'd see in the bookstore. That should also be at least an initial red flag.
So, given that it's not necessarily illegal, and I think that's probably the best advice, don't read the good reviews. Go to the bottom, read the 1-star reviews, because obviously there are people aware of what's going on. What other tips might you have for someone who wants to buy one of these guidebooks?
Well, first of all, I should say the good reviews, if you actually read them, are also pretty obviously fake. A lot of times they don't make much sense. They sort of talk in circles. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I'd say just go with the trusted brands. It's pretty obvious. There's a lot of them out there. The basic ones are Lonely Planet and Frommer's and Fodor's. Rick Steves, DK Eyewitness is another brand. Moon Guides. The other thing you can do, and quite honestly, it's probably the best thing you can do, is if you can, go to a bookstore. These books are not for sale in bookstores, the AI guides.
Right.
They're going to be vetted. They would never be sold there. In fact, they're even if you could get them as an ebook, of course, on Kindle, but you can also get them when they're printed to order by an Amazon facility. So they're not the kind of books that you're going to see in bookstores. Okay. If you can get to a bookstore, do it that way. If you can't, read those reviews really carefully and go with a known brand.
Okay. There's some
I think that is
for you.
excellent advice. Yeah. I'm still personally, I want the book that I can hold on to, and I want it to be from a name that I know and trust, and that does the regular updates and such. And I'm still old fashioned that way. And maybe this is a sign that we should perhaps start to be a little bit more old fashioned.
Well, I mean, the travel guidebooks are sort of unique. If I'm reading a novel, I don't really care that much whether it's a physical book or on an ebook. But the travel guide, you want to carry around with you. You want to have it with you. It has like the local police numbers. It has all kinds of different phrase books. And, you don't want to be getting out your Kindle or your phone and looking through it, especially if you run out of batteries or don't have a signal or something like that. Yeah. Having that guidebook with you is a real safety issue as well as just a convenience when you're traveling.
So we're out of time. I'm just wondering, when you look to buy a travel guide, so you know all the names, you're obviously a seasoned traveler. Have you heard from people since you wrote this saying, wow, thanks for doing this? Like, this is the kind of book I bought and I was completely, disappointed when I got it?
I haven't heard from anyone directly who said, I bought one of these books. I have heard from a lot of people who are shocked by this article.
As we are. Hey, listen, thank you so much, Seth. We appreciate the time.
All right, my pleasure.
Seth KUGEL, New York Times, author and travel columnist. Look, you got to be so careful. If you look at the page, they all look the same. They steal a photo. The photos are all the same. Please pay attention.
I don't know
You're wasting your money.
how we are going to function going forward. Like, hey, if someone's going to send you a picture of your husband having an affair with someone, and it's going to look so real, you won't be able to tell. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think AI is going to mess us up.
You have a picture like that?
I do not have a picture.
That wraps up another edition of The Week That Was here on the iHeartRadio Network. I'm Aaron Rand along with Natasha Hall, and we will see you next week.
Have a wonderful week.
This has been the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand and Natasha Hall.
Listen live on your radio weekday afternoons from 2 to 6
on CJAD 800
or through the iHeartRadio app.